Hi, I'm Matthias, and this is the pistol, revolver, a breech-loading Enfield Mark II. Also, it's still interchangeable. Let's go ahead and get in the light box. Those of you who saw last episode will find no surprise in the fact that this is 11.5 inches in length, and you might be mildly surprised to find out that it is 2.5 pounds in weight, because that's technically just a hair lighter than last time. Now the cylinder fits 6 rounds of Enfield Mark II or III, again being fed through the side gate and extracted in a wacky way. Alright gang, you know the drill by now. This is the bit where I remind you that the show is almost exclusively funded by you, the dedicated arms history enjoyer. Let me remind you that it just takes as low as $1 a month, that's only a dozen a year, to keep this show rolling, and it will get you access to our behind the scenes, frankly awful podcast. That said, some of our funding now comes from the lovely gentleman over at Ballistol. Fun fact, both of these Enfields today are black powder guns, which means that they needed extensive cleaning after firing for our episode. A process for which I used our own sponsor's chief product, the Universal Gun Oil, before they ever sponsored the show. I'm frankly glad that no other oil has approached us because it could have been kind of awkward. I highly recommend that if you're shooting a black powder cartridge especially, it's probably a good idea to keep one of these little handy spray cans with you, and probably an appropriately sized Ballistol bore snake. This will save a lot of grief later on in the day, or worse yet, maybe a year later when you realize you forgot. It certainly beats peeing in it. Alright, let's get into it. Last time we saw the evolution of not one, but 2 revolver systems. The Warrant Lockwork, a simple single and double action with automatic rebounding hammer, further augmented by a 5th element, which it turns out is a little rotary arm. And the Owen Jones selective extraction system, meant to unload quickly and ditch only the spent cases, keeping the live ammo in place. Both of these systems were smashed together, resulting in the Enfield Mark I of 1880, the first revolver to be produced by the British government, at their Royal Small Arms Factory, Enfield. The new revolver also saw a new cartridge, the .455 Enfield Mark II, a black powder powerhouse, at least by comparison to the previous Adams .450. Unfortunately for the British Armed Forces, the Enfield Mark I revolver wasn't all that it could have been. Problems were apparent fairly early on. You know what? Let's take a look at some of them. Now, the easiest problem to face down was the fact that the front sight was fairly sharp and was cutting up holsters, so this guy's probably going to get rounded off soon. The cylinder was capable of being rotated just about at any time when the gun wasn't in lockup or battery, so this rotation doesn't seem like a big deal, but in very specific circumstances, it could be a problem. Imagine I had 6 cartridges in here. I fire 2 of them in battle or for whatever reason, and then I have 4 live cartridges remaining. Okay, so 1 cartridge fire, 2 cartridge fire, we should be here. That way, the next time I pull the trigger, well, we're going to get 3rd cartridge fire. But if this cylinder is allowed to just sort of rotate it on its own, maybe being holstered, unholstered, or banged around in a fight, well, you can rotate right past number 3, and now you're on number 4. Or you rotate twice, and you're on number 5 and 6. So in that situation, you'd fire 2 more times. Pull the trigger, boom, boom. Okay, that's all right. But you go to pull for your, well, from your perspective, it's supposed to be your 5th boom, and you get a click. And then you get another click, and then finally you get your 5th and 6th booms. That can be very confusing and terrifying, and frankly, dangerous down to the split second in a fight. So, if you can prevent that rotation, that'd be a lot nicer. Now, another concern learned from experience is that 2 things can go wrong loading this gun. If you open the gate and start loading or unloading cartridges, nothing prevents you from accidentally pulling the trigger all the way through and discharging one somewhere in that stack. It's a heavy trigger, so I don't know why you would, but nothing prevents it. The other problem is you can open that gate with the hammer back, and nothing prevents it from going back either when the gate is open. So you could, in theory, cock the gun for whatever reason, and then start loading and unloading, at which point a very light touch of that trigger is going to also cause you a problem. In other words, it's bad that the lockwork can be used when the gate is open. Interestingly, in an August of 1881 patent filed in Belgium, Michael Kaufman attempted to address these last two major concerns, which means that he was likely still in contact with Enfield. His solutions do not appear to have been used, at least not as depicted here. Now, we've already seen one of the other problems, which is that the selective extraction principle wasn't perfect. I mean, yeah, you have to manipulate it a fair bit to get certain things to work, but also, if you notice, I'm getting kind of a tie-up, there we go, and it's not the lockwork that's doing it. What's doing it is the fact that there's cartridges in there, despite being correct to this particular gun, are hanging out. I mean, look at how badly that guy's gotten out of place. It's not enough for him to escape the gun, but boy is he in the wrong spot. So if I get this spent casing we missed out of there, look at this nightmare. Come on, okay, good. If I get him out of there, but I've got some guy like that one hanging out wild, and I try to close her up, well, now the one at the bottom's hanging out wild, if I try to close her up, it's very stiff, and then if I kind of work it back and forth, look what's happened. Yeah, I'm inside the extractor. That's going to be a jam as well. Basically, the selective extraction system would lead to a fair number of jams in field use while trying to get this whole thing juggled together. The biggest problem was that the cartridges, the live ones, are able to fit in there so loosely that they can sort of flop around like that and get in their own way. Another major problem was actually with the cartridge itself. This is not an original Mark II Enfield cartridge, but that's alright, I'm just demonstrating for a moment anyway. What would happen is that the bullet, being so heavy, would actually serve as sort of an inertia block. So it wants to stay still while the rest of the gun recoils. The case is being dragged along with the cylinder because they're attached at the rim, right? Well, since the bullet wants to stay still, there's a lot of force holding it essentially coming out the front of the chamber. And after a few shots, you might have, especially the round in this position of the gun, pop a bullet far enough out to then get caught in either the holster stay or, if it's up here, into the path of the barrel, which means it would jam up the action and be, frankly, kind of a big pain to clear because you have no immediate rod or remedial action. Now, the initial attempt to fix that last issue was simple enough. They just added a couple of punch cribs to the Mark II case. Apparently, even that wasn't going to be enough. Changes would be made to the revolver itself. Now, by April of 1881, an improved design was already submitted for approval. I'm unsure of what features it contained, as it was rejected, mostly because it did not share enough parts interchangeability with the original Mark I. Another attempt was made in August, which led to further testing again at the HMS Excellent in September. This received some notes for improvement, and a pattern was ready by October. It would not be officially adopted, however, until the next year, but I want to keep the story in order, so let's get a look at what actually would be the improved Mark II right now. All right, Mark II. And Mark I. All right. From the outside, the most obvious differences, and don't look at the finish, these two guns are in various states of cleaning, repair, and wear. This one's lost almost all its finish and been cleaned up later on. This one has a lot of patina on it, but I'm going to tell you, if we did a deep clean on it, it would end up looking like this. Fairly bright, which is still technically incorrect. I just think the bluing was not that rugged on these guys. So, what's really different though? Well, at a glance, the biggest one visually is going to be here, the checkering and the grips, because this Mark I was checkered, that extra expense was ditched for the Mark II. A little bit of savings there. And just at a glance, rounded front sight, that's not going to tear up the holster, sharp front sight. Let's get a better look. Mark II, Mark I, and honestly, the Mark I's fairly advanced in the sense that look at this extra cut that goes into that dovetail, and then that guy set in there. That's actually a fair bit of operation compared to whoop, we got a half penny shoved in there. While we're looking at little details, the flutes have been ditched from the holster guides. They're dead solid. Now, if you look at the cylinder, it seems almost the same. We have the flutes, we have the stops, we have the sprag cuts. There's something else going on. look right there, that little notch. There's 6 of them on this gun, and I can only show them to you by kind of cocking the hammer back a little bit so that I can rotate this around. The reason I have to cock the hammer back is, well, because of those notches. They're engaging with a tab that's inside the breech face and preventing the cylinder from rotating when it is not locked up in battery. So, hey, no more accidental holster roll. You can probably just barely make out the little foot of that guy right here. He's going to be a lot easier to see in the animation. He's also interacted with by the gate. Opening it up retracts him just enough to allow the cylinder to rotate. So just to show that off, there, she's locked, can't roll. Open the gate. Hey, not too bad. And another feature of this gun is with the gate open, we can no longer cock the hammer back. We can no longer work the trigger. Much safer in that regard as well. It's not a feature that shows well on camera, but the mouths of the chambers are actually slightly tapered now. They prevent the bullet from being able to easily scooch forward under recoil, give it a little bit more support. Minor milling changes also appear between the two models. Here we have the Mark I, here we have the Mark II. This bridge was eradicated. It's just a nice clean cut there. Instead of 2 separate scallops here, just a little bit of time saving added. And we can see changes again in the top strap, as from the Mark I we have this, I guess you could call it jimping, but there's a couple of extra cuts here. And on the Mark II, they said, no, let's just get the full strength of it, we'll bring it all the way down, and then boom, we're in place. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure why this was cut this way in the first place. This seems a lot simpler. Looking at the back of the gun, the grip is no longer attached by these screws down the spine, nor is this a separate piece. There's no key for it like on the Mark I. As a matter of fact, the way the grip is attached is by the lanyard ring. To remove the grip, we actually just have to go through the lanyard and unscrew it like a big old screw. And when we get in there, you'll notice that there's no longer a tab here on the side plate, and there's an extra side plate screw. That's because it's entirely unnecessary to remove the grip in order to get the side plate off. As a matter of fact, the tip of this guy, see that little nipple on there? He actually he's screwed into this position, and that little nipple fits into a notch on the mainspring that keeps it from being able to jump out of position as well. So you have to remove this in order to get the mainspring out, but not to get access to the lockwork. Again, a 2-screw solution. I'm going ahead and pre-loosen these a little bit so you guys aren't bored to death. This rear one's a little stiffer, and frankly, doesn't want to come out easily. There we go. Pop that guy loose, and then once again, we have pry points. We now have 2, one here and one here. That will allow us to get into the action a little bit easier than last time. Suspect that rear pry point was done quite on purpose from having to deal with the first gun, because now I should be able to do this without having to take her to the side and banging on her, even though this gun's technically a little dirtier than the first. And then boom, there's our lockwork. From this perspective, it should look almost absolutely identical. The changes are buried at the back. All right, I pulled most of the lockwork apart so that I could get at this little guy, which is our 5th component added to the Warnet lock, and it now has a little finger on it. That is serving as the cylinder locking bolt, and it pops out the front. We saw it earlier. If I go ahead and remove the hammer, we'll see the other additional component added to the system, which is this arm with flat spring that powers it. The geometries in here are a little complicated, and I can't really find a good way to show you this just with a light sitting at the desk. Luckily, we have an animator for that. So let me go ahead and flip this over though, so you can see the relationship here, which is that this extension right here underneath the gate, that is, by the way, impacted by the gate, that is directly tied to this arm. They are one and the same component. Just hard to make out without flipping the gun this way and that. Honestly, it's a wee bit insanely difficult to see down in there, so let's get Bruno's help at understanding the changes to this particular firearm.
The Mark II's general lockwork and operation doesn't differ much from the original Mark I, so we're only going to show you the 2 big mechanical changes. The first is the addition of this unusually shaped part. To be honest, it's hard to see it all from this angle. Here we can see it from the high rear. It's shaped so that when the loading gate is opened, its head is driven leftward over top of the trigger. In this position, the trigger cannot be pulled, nor can the hammer be cocked, meaning the firearm is now safe to load. Closing the gate allows the safety to spring back to the right, freeing the trigger. Also, take note of this simple support spring. It keeps upwards pressure on the safety spring, keeping it from falling below the top of the trigger, which would keep it from doing its job. It's also worth noting that, with the hammer cocked, the new safety also prevents the gate from being opened. In this position, the trigger is too high to allow the spring to flex, meaning the gate does not have room to rotate open. The hammer must be dropped before the space is freed up. The other big change is an addition of a sort of foot to the fabled fifth component. Using a horizontal pin, a tapered foot is positioned towards the center of the recoil shield at the bottom. A small hole was made so that the foot can project through. When the action is at rest, the foot catches in one of 6 notches in the cylinder. This prevents rotation whenever the pistol isn't in use. When the shooter either cocks the hammer or pulls the trigger, the fifth component lever rises with the hand. As it rises, the foot is pulled up and out of the path of the cylinder, allowing it to rotate. Alright, that's about it for major changes. If you'd like to learn more, check out our previous episode. Now, let's get back to Othais.
Just like last time, we can't go straight into shooting this firearm without covering a little more ground, specifically ammunition, because while this design was finished, but not yet officially announced, the new Mark III Enfield cartridge was also introduced. This variation was developed to accomplish 3 goals, with one major change. The bullet was increased to the same diameter as the case, 0.477 inch. The now healed bullet also features an external lubrication groove. The larger bullet further cooperated with the tapered chambers in order to prevent the bullet from setting forward when the prior round was fired. The larger diameter also made them play better with the selective extraction system. Supposedly, it also improved the bullet's performance with the Henry rifle bore, resulting in better precision. Now, the Mark III ammunition in particular has indirectly created a lot of confusion in later years, so much so that I've actually never really clarified the issue until just this moment. That's because to most casual collectors, these 3 British service revolvers chamber the following cartridges: 450 Adams, 476 Enfield, and 455 Webley. And yet, that Enfield cartridge never truly existed as stated. As we've seen, the Enfield Mark I and Mark II cartridges were 0.455 inch in diameter. The pistol's bores were 450. When the Mark III cartridge was made, the bullet was matched to the case, 477 inch. So if we're being technical, our chart should kind of look like this, which is already a bit confusing. But where did the term 476 come from? Well, that would actually be from the commercial market, where the revolvers meant to chamber either the Enfield Mark II or Mark III cartridges, or even the 455 Webley cartridge when available, were marked 455/476, that latter number likely coming from the Ely commercial cartridge branded as 476. Reading straight off the guns, people just assumed 476 was the government cartridge, and therefore it was applied to the Enfield revolvers. Whatever you call it, the Enfield Mark III cartridge was approved in December of 1881, and the Mark II revolver dragged a bit behind. Final approval was in March of 1882, and it entered the list of changes in April. Now, the pistol, revolver, breech loading, Enfield, Mark II, yes, interchangeable. All that is to say that May actually gets to shoot it now. I'm going to be honest, I don't see a whole lot of difference, but we'll see if May found something that we didn't notice. First, there's a new screwdriver. Like the Revolver, it's been simplified and improved. And like the Mark I screwdriver, I don't have one. Now in terms of production, the new Mark II was touted as costing 2 shillings 6 less than the prior Mark I. I'm really not sure how they did that math though. Recall from last time, the average cost for the Mark I was £2, 19 shillings and 7 pence per revolver. For the years of 1882 to 83, this actually rose to £3, 5 shillings, 3 So, probably included some tooling and overhead there. Because by the next year, this became £2, 12 shillings, 11 pence. From April 1882 to March 1883, 8,480 Mark II pistols would be produced. This number fell sharply in the next year, then rose slightly for 2 more, and then promptly fell off a cliff. Fun fact, that one pistol for 1887 was apparently a holster stock variation. I would love to see that. In total, this makes for 13,104 Enfield Mark II revolvers as compared to the Mark I, which clocked in at 12,419. Actually, that's fairly even. Now let's talk service life. Revolvers were at this time issued to the Lancers and the non-commissioned officers of the cavalry, infantry, and navy, plus special troops like cavalry trumpeters. Officers generally purchased their own sidearms, and given the, let's go with qualities of the Enfield service revolver, this actually created quite a market for a number of Liège and Birmingham gun makers. The first batch of Enfield pistols were apparently shipped to India, along with the mysterious Mark I cartridge. I'm unsure if there was even time for field reports to come back before the cartridge change was made. Conflict-wise, the Mark I Enfield arrived just behind the Second Anglo-Afghan War, but was well into production and likely saw some issue during the First Boer War, beginning in December of 1880. This Dutch-English fight in South Africa resulted in a British loss and eventually an independent South Africa. In 1882, the Enfield would face the Anglo-Egyptian War. This is also about the time that the Mark IIs were starting to appear. While I doubt it was due to the revolver, this was a British victory. In 1885, the third and final Anglo-Burmese War saw the fall of an independent Burma. And in 1888, India saw 2 conflicts, the Sikkim expedition, expelling Tibetan forces, and the Hazara expedition, which was actually campaigned in what is modern-day Pakistan against the tribes of the Kaladaka. Honestly, by the time of those last 2, the Enfield had already been officially replaced, which means it had an exceptionally short service life for a handgun that didn't even straddle any particular change in technologies. I mean, technically, it lasted until smokeless powder appeared on the world stage, but it was already in the process of being superseded at that point, and its replacement remained a black powder at first anyway. Frankly, it's pretty easy to find the faults in this particular handgun. It's big, heavy, awkward to handle. The ejection is theoretically fast, but the bottom case regularly sticks. Selective extraction was also unreliable. Loading was slow, as it was done singularly. As a matter of fact, when the Mark II pistol was approved, the Director of Naval Ordnance put in a note in the approval file pleading that the next new pattern pistol should not retain a loading gate while also having simultaneous eject. Barrel latches were particularly weak, with springs sagging or breaking. It took very little wear for the barrel assembly to start loosening up, causing a loss of precision, which wasn't apparently great to begin with because Henry rifling wasn't ideal for a pistol barrel. In October of 1884, the assistant superintendent at Enfield published a series of tests of various revolvers and British cartridges focused on recoil, muzzle velocity, and penetration. These did not exactly praise the present service standard. In July of 1886, Adjutant General Lord Garnet Wolseley wrote the Surveyor General of Ordnance. He felt the Enfield pistols were heavy and inconvenient, and thought his own personal revolver was a better design. This was apparently a price-type revolver retailed by Adams & Company, and weighed in 13 1/4 ounces less than the service Enfield. He loaned his pistol for testing, and it was found to be unfortunately inaccurate. However, a similar Webley No. 4 was also tested, performing well despite a shorter barrel and lighter weight than the Enfield. On review, Wolseley didn't like the price pattern, so the matter was sent along for further research and review. In July of 1886, the Director of Artillery asked the Director of Naval Ordnance whether he was satisfied with the Enfield revolver, and if not, would he give direction on what would be acceptable. He, of course, had objections, although I'll cover those in detail when we get a chance at the early Webley top breaks. While this was going on, what is really a terrible tragedy actually struck for the Enfield on November 3rd of 1886. Serving aboard the HMS Flying Fish as it commenced surveying duties in East Asia, Naval Lieutenant Henry E. Ruper's Enfield revolver slipped clear of his holster as he was leaning over the gunwale of a landing boat attempting to empty the water from his boots. The revolver fell, struck its hammer, right there, on the floor of the boat, and sadly discharged through Ruper's head. Ultimately, another Webley design would be approved for trials in February of 1887. This resulted in the eventual adoption of the Webley Mark I, a revolver that would serve with minor modifications far, far longer than the Enfield 7 years. Now, official adoption always lagged behind actual acceptance, and a bid to purchase from Webley was already in place by July of 1887. That same month, however, the Enfield was receiving yet another update. This time, it was a hammer block, and I actually find this somewhat curious. A simple slot was milled into the side plate, and a long, flat spring was fitted. This had a projection on one side that would block the path of the hammer, preventing the firing pin from reaching a live primer. An extension was added to the back of the hand, which would flex the spring out of the way only when the trigger was pulled. This system is extremely similar in design and operation to the later Italian Delauzo and the Smith & Wesson side plate hammer blocks. The update was ordered to be fitted to every revolver in stores, whether it be a Mark I or a Mark II. There was no advancement of the Enfield revolver's designation, as this was meant to be a universal change. Interestingly, I don't have an example of one here, probably in part because the spring safety would soon be replaced with another design. The Mark II safety catch would be introduced in April of 1889. This was an internal solution and was not apparent from the outside of the gun. Updated pistols are, however, marked with a large S just below the barrel latch. Inside, an L-shaped hammer block is affixed to the Kaufman fifth component, meaning it only rises with the hand and therefore only when the trigger is pulled. At its lowest position, it locks the hammer from traveling forward. At its peak, it fits into a matching notch cut in the hammer's neck, allowing the hammer to fall. This is again a very familiar system. Again from the Bodeo and much later the Smith & Wesson. Good lord, the same evolution 3 times in history. Now, neither of these pistols here have the safety updates, nor do 2 more that I know of here in town with another collector. As a matter of fact, it seems most pistols in the US market don't seem to have the safety. Now, the records are a bit weird because they record some of the converted pistols directly, but also log a bunch of conversion parts that were being produced but not necessarily fitted, and honestly there could be some overlap of those 2 things. Not just of parts made and fitted, but also of guns converted from Mark I to Mark II safeties. But let's just add all the numbers together and see if we get close to the total of number of pistols. I get a possible maximum of 18,414 safety adjustments. If we just cite the known fittings of parts, then we come down to only 12,891. So somewhere between half and loosely 3/4 of production. The obvious question is, why are unsafe Enfields overrepresented in the current market? Well, I kind of have a theory. I suspect that most of those revolvers available to us in the US are the ones that wandered out to the colonies before the changes came. And it seems the Enfield had a much longer service life outside of the main branches of service anyway. Notable examples include the Canadian Northwest Mounted Police, who took in just over 1,000 Enfield Mark II pistols starting in December of 1882, keeping them in service as late as 1911. Fun fact, due to a miscommunication, they were stuck with the old Adams cartridge for the first few years of using those Mark II Enfields. Just as well, though, as they also had Adams revolvers. Other lots were sold to the Royal Irish Constabulary, take that Webley, I guess, and several contracts were let out in Australia. Queensland ordered 100 in March of 1885. I'm unsure if they took any more. Victoria purchased 340 in total, and New South Wales marked examples have also turned up, again with an uncertain quantity. Some Australian guns remained in service long enough to actually be marked by the Federation post-1903. Beyond the Colonial purchases, there were likely plenty of Enfields that weren't exactly prioritized for refurbishment once the Webleys started arriving. Instead, it's likely that these remote pistols were pushed further into secondary uses before being surplused out. Given the fair number produced and their infrequent appearance in the market, I suspect that many might have been destroyed or lost, but I'm unsure how. Alright, both Warnant and Owen Jones will be featured in other stories, especially on this channel in the future. So I don't think we have to wind up their biographies just yet. Instead, let's go to May and get her final thoughts on shooting, specifically in this case, the Enfield Mark II. All right, once more we made room for May.
Hi.
And then I have not one, but two of these revolvers. We have the Mark I. We have the Mark I?
Yeah, Mark II.
Mark II.
Yeah.
Differences.
Well, not a lot. If I'm just looking at it from the outside, okay? Outside first. Front sights are different.
Okay.
Yeah. There's no checkering on the grip on the Mark II. And it looks like basically if you look all around the gun, oh, interesting. The front sight on this one is longer, or the rear sight's longer for the groove cut there.
Right.
And then it looks like in general they probably simplified some of the metal cut-ins on the Mark II, like underneath here, right in front of the trigger guard.
You can tell like 2 radial cuts down to 1 radial cut.
Yeah, and over the top of the ridge right here. This extra
sort of weird jimping that's going on here, they got rid of that.
Yeah, why is that critical? Was that probably for heat dispersion or something?
I don't know why it was there to begin with, to be honest with you.
That was weird. It seems like an overly complicated
They might have cut it that way to avoid mirage, but that doesn't make sense.
And then you pointed it out earlier to me, but the grips where they line up, there's like a different cut here essentially with the metal essentially for the plate.
Yep.
Yeah, the plate right there.
Okay.
That I think is pretty much it. Oh, wait. Oh, the hammer.
What?
No, never mind. What? I thought it was more concave than convex. Oh no, there's a little bit of a curve to it.
Slightly more.
Yeah, look at that. They thought about it.
Slightly better.
Yeah, slightly better
we hope,
hammer.
Maybe. Actually, manipulate it, see if it's any better.
Right, and it just came.
That's the face of success.
Face of glory. Ah!
Oh, God, was that the click of the gun or the click of you?
Glory. That was the click of glory.
Let me try with my normal hand. I would not say that there's any appreciable difference there.
There's not a lot. It feels terrible.
No, it's not.
I will say, I think this little turn up on the edge of the hammer feels a little bit better, but it's still terrible. It's still terrible for placement. It still doesn't feel great.
Not great. No,
not much better.
Okay, so mechanically, what have we got going on different?
So there's some things definitely that are happening here.
Look what I can do.
Look what I can't do.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, it is patently better, actually.
Look what I can do.
I know. Honestly, that's terrifying to me. The fact that you can open the gate and manipulate the hammer.
You're a sucker. You're going to be loading your gun. You're going to be halfway loaded, and you're going to get attacked, and you're not going to be able to defend yourself without first closing the gate. But I'll be able to. Okay,
you'll win in some ways.
Yeah, it's far more likely that I'm just going to shoot my horse like that one guy did.
Oh, yeah, he did shoot his horse. God. Anyway, there are some better safety features on this guy, which, cool, great. There are definitely some improvements. And they've lightened the metal a little bit with those extra cutouts, I'm assuming. Maybe? No, there's probably no difference.
No, there's no difference. It's interesting, though. That gun clocks in slightly lighter than this one on our scale. I actually couldn't find a historical record for
So I was right, and he was wrong.
I couldn't find a historical record for the supposed weight. Okay. And this gun's been scrubbed, and that gun has not. There's still gunk in that gun. Okay. So theoretically, that gun it has more stuff going on in it. It has more gunk in it. It should weigh more. It does not. So materially, that must be a lighter gun to some degree. I'm not sure where that came out from. Maybe it's the lack of this prominent ridge up here and the extra deep cut underneath or something. But that gun is materially lighter despite the additions.
You know what's amazing? Something I just noticed just now. We were talking about the front sight. This is worse. This whole... have you looked down the sight on this Mark II comparing to the Mark I?
I was going to ask you about that.
Oh my God,
because this is one of the worst sights we ever saw.
And then they somehow made them tinier. What is this?
This one is like the LaCroix of gun sights.
It's not even a V-notch. I think I call that a U-notch. That is the softest V if there ever was one. What's the joke? Is this, a sight for babies?
It's like the joke about the LaCroix where it's like, well, we set the can next to a fruit for about an hour. Right? It's just, for that rear sight, they were just like, okay, we got Marty with a file. He makes 3 strokes, and then we're out.
If that, son. Marty went real light on them strokes right there.
If you were the guy in charge of cutting the rear sight on the Enfield Mark II, you had the easiest job on the planet.
Literally, they just kissed it like once or twice, and they were done. They didn't even go all the way down this time. They just kiss a little on the top. It's fine.
Somebody at one point got a piece of lint in here, and they said, we're going to make it smaller than lint. That way nothing ever happens like that again.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened. No. You just aim. You know what? The whole thing is the front sight. You're just looking at this whole thing, and you're just evening this thing out in the center somewhere.
They should have gone to a gutter sight at this point.
Yeah, right. That'd have been better.
Okay, so
that's terrible.
We know manipulating the hammer is not any better. Is pulling the trigger any better?
You know what? On range, when they were loaded, I don't remember there being a difference. Let me pull here dry. No.
On the plus side, it's remarkable that they added the extra features without interrupting the mechanism at all.
Yeah, that's impressive.
It's not materially worse.
No, it's definitely not. Although, hold on. Let me see if this trigger snags like the other one does on the rebound, on the reset. Yep. Oh, God, it snags in more places.
It's when the warrants engage. Watch the hammer when you do that.
Yeah.
I guarantee it's the rebound engaging.
Let's see. Snag one there.
And then that's when it...
Snag two.
The hammer starts moving.
Okay, yeah. All right. Sure, right before the hammer moves and then right after it starts moving. Okay.
Now, neither of these have the hammer block safeties.
Okay.
So do not drop them onto hard surfaces on their hammers.
Although, I still feel like you have to literally hit it at one specific angle because this knuckle is so big back here.
It is actually interesting how it's shrouded in such a way that you really do have to get just
Was that their method of trying to keep it drop safe? It's like, no, just make the spur on the back really big, or the knuckle really big, and it'll be fine.
I don't think so. In theory, the Warrant hammer rebound is supposed to act as a block to a degree. As a matter of fact, when they discovered the problem, they did blame it on worn components. They decided those components had worn in or were not fitted to the correct tolerance.
They didn't happen to say what the amount of weight impact needed to be, did it?
Well, apparently falling from a height of less than 3 feet onto the floor of a landing boat.
That's not a lot of feet. No, never mind.
Well, you say that, it's not a lot of feet, but this is a heavy friggin' gun. Like, just bam, that's a lot.
Somebody do me the gravity math. Leave it in the comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, fully loaded, that's 2.5 pounds falling 3 feet. That's going to be a pretty good impact.
A little over 2.5 pounds with loaded, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a lot.
I forgot where I was going with this. Anyway, they could have a hammer block that was a spring. The problem with the spring likely was that if the tension came out of the spring, it would therefore not re-engage, and therefore you could never guarantee that your hammer block was working unless you went in there and checked it over and over again, right?
Right.
With the rod, it's a rod. It doesn't go slack. So it would always work. We saw this happen in a previous episode, also on a Warrant-derived operation for the Italian 1889, the Bodeo. That gun started with a side spring system, Delauzo, and then went on to have a physical hammer block that was, again, fitting in a notch in the hammer. And then we saw it also in our Smith & Wesson episode, because the Smith & Wessons had a spring-loaded side plate hammer block. And then they went over to the same rod system, which is just really weird to see. Also, the way they stack, right? By the time of the Bodeo's invention, this gun had already gone through both of its hammer blocks, right? Or the second one was coming into existence as the Bodeo was invented, and it had no hammer block. Years later, the Bodeo gets the first hammer block from this system, and then years after that, it gets the second hammer block method. And then over in the US, the Smith & Wesson gets the first hammer block, the spring hammer block, after both this gun and the Bodeo have invented both systems. And then it gets the actual true hammer block way after everything's already been solved. So the same mistake was made by not having a hammer block, instead just having a rebound, then by having a spring hammer block, then fixed by having an actual hammer block, which is just weird to see it happen 3 times in exactly the exact same way 3 times. It's nutty.
That is impressive, actually.
I mean, history repeats. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was one of my favorite things to learn in the process of this.
Is it just lack of communication or just lack of actual?
Oh, I'm quite sure they just hadn't seen the other guy's thing. You know, like it wasn't in there. How many things do you actually know? This is why you should study all the guns before you make one gun.
We get to cheat. We have the internet and the show.
Even with the internet, it would have been hard to know that. This was actually kind of a deep dive to pick these details up.
Yeah, you actually got a lot of help from some people on this one.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
I forget where we're at in this process. So you've done it. You pull the trigger. It's the same trigger.
Yep.
The boom, I assume, is the same boom.
Yep. Recoil is the same. Still big, still loud and fiery, but mild to moderate.
So other than the safety features, the only other thing we could talk about is extraction. But unfortunately, we didn't have a 477 lead die.
Right.
So we don't have 477 bullets. Technically, those are the tapered chambers. Did you notice any difference in the ease of extraction?
No, honestly, if I remember correctly, I don't think there really was much of a difference. I think they all pretty much wiggled free when I shook them, and then the very one at the base, the 6 o'clock round, decided it was going, or the case decided it was going to stick.
Yeah, we'd have to make an exact replica of the 477 Mark III bullet in order to get it to behave that way. If you ever see those things too, they're sort of like more tulip than usual.
Yeah.
And I think that's to put that diameter far enough forward to get the engagement they're looking for to behave with this gun.
Okay.
So I don't have those handy to test out to see how well they behaved, but they probably did a fairly good job of making the system run better as a selective extraction
I would have been curious to try. Now I'll never know.
Do you think selective extraction had any real merit, though? Like, would you prefer to have a selective extraction revolver?
I mean, let's game it out for a second. So I can fire up to 3 rounds without it really being an issue, because presumably if I crack open the top and I don't move this cylinder any right here.
At all?
No, none. And then close it back up. Presumably, I should be able to open the gate and I can load 1, 2, 3 live rounds. And
then you're back in business.
Yeah.
So, okay, I see what you're saying. So, in other words, the position of... the position, just so everybody at home understands this, because you're going fast. The position of the loading gate is such that it is the 3rd round from the last fire round.
Yeah, so 3rd round essentially at least lets me start right there where the loading gate is located.
So if you fire 3, snap it open, don't move the cylinder, and then snap it closed. You would have an empty hole looking at you when you open the gate.
Right.
And then as you rolled it, you'd have 2 more empty holes.
Yep.
So in that specific instance, that would probably be faster than, if everything worked perfectly, it'd be faster than a top break where everything goes and you have to load 6.
But that's the max you can do, because if you did 4, well, then you got one round that's over, and there wouldn't be any rapidity would be lost.
Let me see if I get the math on this. We fired 4. We shook them out without rotating the cylinder. We close it. Now I load 1, 2, 3. Then I skip 1, 2. Then I load 4. Oh, God, the math on this starts to get a little bit weird.
Yeah.
And at that point, I don't think you're saving any time.
I really don't think it's a useful feature whatsoever, personally.
Okay, now that's just if everything works perfectly.
Yeah.
How perfect does everything work?
Yeah, no, it literally never works perfect. Nothing ever works perfect that we shoot on this show.
I never even doing the uptick, I never once got it where I could just close it. If I had rounds in there, I had to do it like a half start and then pop it again.
Mm-hmm. And then jiggling the cases out that were empty there was always at least one that stuck.
Oh yeah, the 6 o'clock position.
Yeah,
that's the one.
Yeah. So it's not a perfect system.
So you're not a fan of selective extraction?
No, I just don't think it's really useful. I think it's honestly just a waste of a feature attempt.
It honestly is one of those things that probably came over from the shotgun world.
Think so?
And they thought it was like going to be a hot ticket thing. And then it was not.
No, not for revolvers. At least not done this way. Maybe there is a better way to do it, but I'm not quite familiar with it. Oh, I just realized I didn't really talk about the gate at all.
What do you mean?
In the Mark 1 and 2, in the Mark 1 episode. I like these gates.
Oh, just the thumb pad?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really positive thumb grab right there for people.
It is actually very comfortable.
Yeah, it's tapered. It's got a nice curve to it that feels really comfortable.
You're never going to miss or mess it up.
No, really,
it does seem to be a little bit out in the window. I wonder if it was prone to cracking.
I don't know. That's a good question. It's a very thick piece, though. I don't know. I kind of liked it.
That's an interesting thing to kind of wind down on.
Yeah, no, sorry. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. I literally rubbed my thumb against it and I just realized I was kind of appreciating the curvature to it. So I want to make sure I mentioned it.
Okay, so
what else? I think that's it.
We'd really be getting into internals to talk about anything else. I don't think the added mechanisms make the gun unreliable at all.
No.
I guess there is a theory that the hammer lockout system could get stuck in the down position and jam the gun, but I don't really see how that would be easy to do. I've seen a few examples where the hammer lockout system on the gate was actually cracked, probably because the gate was open and the gun was hit or struck in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it could fail as a lockout system, but it's not going to break the gun. Those guns ran. I
think the only thing to really comment is that in the end, when comparing the two pistols especially, this one was technically safer and a little bit easier to use. The only thing that was superior on the Mark I was the sights.
Yeah, that's true. Both of these guns were well out of service by the Great War.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess there's maybe some colonial police use or something going on, but we're not seeing them at the front lines.
Right.
And we're not really a Great War show anymore. We're talking about a lot of things.
That's true. We're kind of going back and we're going to try to go forward as well.
When you see this gun against its contemporaries, all right?
Okay.
The contemporaries for us having handled them would be the Tranter 1878, the Tranter 1879.
Sure.
That's specifically in Britain. A good contemporary, actually probably the most recognizable contemporary for this gun, or the most fair,
The Swiss.
would be the Swiss, because the Swiss uses the same lockwork almost exactly.
Yep.
Where does this rank in relation to all these late 70s, early 80s pistols that we've put our hands on?
Well, I honestly think that the Tranter 79 is more advanced personally. It's got a pretty positive top brake, load and ejection system. I even have that button option on there to not pop the star.
Right.
Which is kind of a nice feature, frankly.
Right.
And I remember it felt better, obviously, to shoot. I think that one technically would beat out the Enfield.
Yeah, the problem with the Tranter 79 is really more in the lock work, because and this is coming from a guy that understands lock work timings. That lock work is more of a pain in the butt to time than something like the Warnet or a Mariette style, right? But that's sort of a much more nuanced thing. That's an armorer problem, right?
Sure.
But from your
I don't got to worry about it, though.
From your perspective, the British ultimately selected most of the features of Tranter 79 later on, right? They went for a triple action rebounding hammer, side latch, top brake with simultaneous eject. Yeah, that's the Tranter 7.
It's there.
It's just the execution would end up being different, and it would be under Webley.
Right.
Because Tranter was frankly gone by then. So I agree with you. Tranter 79 would be a far better gun.
Now, the Swiss 78, that one is actually not too bad when you think of it. It's technically a gate loader.
Not too bad. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yeah, it's a gate loader without a gate.
Yeah, gate loader without a gate, which was a unique perspective. But we've got an ejector rod that was pretty solid ejector rod latched onto there, and you love that ejector rod. It was one of your favorites. You commented on that.
Yep. So this has no mechanism.
So close to your mic.
I'm sorry. This has no mechanism for loading and unloading in any sort of speedy way.
Oh, no, definitely not.
This is much more equivalent in that regards to what this gun replaced, which was the Adams Mark III in service, which was a solid frame gun with an Adams lockwork that loaded through a gate. And they thought, oh, that's too slow and the lockwork's too complicated. So at the bare minimum, they could have taken the Warnet lockwork like these guys did and kept that slow loading and unloading. In that regard, which would you choose between these two?
Honestly, I'd still probably end up going with the Swiss. It felt more comfortable to use as a shooter.
Yeah, this is much easier ergonomically. It's sprung lighter. The cartridge isn't as powerful. It's a 10.4, but it doesn't seem to have as much oots as that guy does.
It doesn't have as much oots, but I argued I was able to oot a little easier with it.
Yeah, you feel... Yeah.
Definitely feel more confident in it. Yeah, this is night and day difference. It feels proportionally more appropriate to my hand. I can actually reach the hammer, which is a nice change. I mean, not that I'm necessarily going to be switching to single action with it. The trigger pull itself, I think I remember this one's actually a lot better. Yeah. Everything about this gun just feels cleaner, too. It definitely is. And honestly, I love the knurling. There's extra attentions to detail to this one that really were strong and some ones that I appreciate.
Okay,
And
you're in love with the Swiss. That's not the topic today, man.
I'm just saying there's a lot more pros to go with that one than there are to go with the Enfield.
This one inspires a lot more confidence. This is, to me, a much better execution of the Warnet lock work. However, I wonder if they really stayed in service long enough, I wonder if they would have suffered the same hammer blow problem.
Maybe. It's possible. Only time would have been able to tell, but unfortunately, they didn't use it so much in the time.
Or the Swiss didn't add butterfingers.
Maybe.
All right, so
Stronger fingers.
we got to give it a win, right? We got to find somewhere.
Well,
there is a gun adopted just 1 year before that one.
Right, I know which one you're going for. You're going for our 79, the Revolver.
Yeah, between the Revolver and this.
Yeah, obviously the Enfield's going to take the win on that one. Who would pick a single action, awkward banana grip Revolver with a safety on it?
All right, now I'm going to challenge you.
Okay.
Are you ready for the curveball?
I mean, sometimes I'm ready.
Smith & Wesson No. 3 Russian. Technically of the same era, simultaneous eject.
That was a pretty easy to use single action.
Beautiful grip, single action only.
Well, the one we shot had that spur on the bottom of the trigger guard. That was pretty nice. If it doesn't have the spur, though, I'd go with the Enfield.
Wait, that's the difference?
I think the spur was really critical for being able to operate the hammer comfortably.
You would choose a single action over the Enfield.
No, I guess not, because double action is really critical.
Is it?
In terms of speed.
Are you speedy with that?
I could be speedy. I could be Gonzalez with the adrenaline pumping.
I weirdly agree. As much as I want to pick the single action for ergos, this is, regardless of anything else, being able to mag dump is critical. At pistol range, I want all 6 out as fast as I can.
I can just never bother with having to operate the hammer. I can just do double action all day long on this one, and it would be fine. Having to do multiple actions to fire the gun, which for a single action revolver is instantly going to DQ it in comparison.
Yeah, which is why the British wouldn't even look at the Colt 1873.
Yeah. Which is sad. It's just really comfortable shoot.
Should I ask between this and the Colt 1878?
God, that one had a really heavy hammer pull or trigger pull.
No, not the Philippine.
Yeah, no, that's true.
The regular
02
one
had the worst one.
Having shot them both, I'm going with the 78.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm going with the 78, yeah.
Mostly because the grip seems weirdly to be a little bit better to me. As
I can actually operate the hammer and manipulate the gun in general better.
Yeah, the saw handle grip on the Colt worked for me better. I weirdly would actually... Here's the problem. If you gave it to me brand new and you sent me out in the field and I only had to fire like 24 shots in my whole campaign, Colt 1878.
Yeah.
If I had to own the gun for 5 years and use it in harsh conditions, Enfield. Because the Colt 78s just fall out of timing.
That's fair.
And we're also picturing the second version of Colt 1878 because remember the lockwork changed. The first version was awful. You can't even hardly find those. They're so awful. So...
Because they just blew apart.
Yeah, we're getting in the min-max zone though. So I think we're getting a better picture of this sort of very hectic change period for revolvers.
It definitely is.
And I don't know that we're ever going to see something as buck wild as this thing.
No,
this is absolutely bizarre in the number of ideas that were crammed into this gun. And we talked about that last time, but just, it blows my mind that as much as I thought this gun was weird, I found out I found one paper that said something and I went, that's weird. No one else mentioned it. Right. And then I had to go and talk to Jonathan over at Royal Armories. And he's like, no, our example has it. Rifling in the chambers.
Right.
Was a feature they were going to add.
Yep.
I mean, they were pouring everything in the kitchen sink into this gun. It was nuts. And then it was so awful.
Every bit of it.
Oh, I still love it.
Sometimes you just don't need to put everything in the one pot dish. Sometimes you can leave a few things out.
Now, I do know for a fact that one of these guns is still in service. Do you know that?
Really?
Yeah.
What?
You don't remember?
No.
Our buddy Tom.
What?
South Carolina has legal open carry, and we know one individual, I love you, buddy, who open carries an Enfield Mark II. I guess he wants the safety features.
He was doing the Colt 1878.
A little bit, but that's just for funsies. No. His serious side piece, the thing that he carries every dang day, is one of these slung on his hip. So,
if you see a man with
buddy.
that's him.
If you're vacationing in Charleston,
that's our buddy Tom.
You see a man open carrying an Enfield.
It's kind of hard to miss him.
Tell him hi for me. Oh, well, at least it has one fan.
That's true.
I think he's a lunatic, only because of his choice of weapon, of course, and various other reasons.
Fair enough. But otherwise, I think that's pretty much everything.
How do you feel about the gun as a collector, though?
It's a certainly unique piece to try out.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was a fun to shoot gun. I love the giant black powder plume that came from it. I love the ridiculousness of the size of it. I love the look of it. I think it absolutely looks wacky, wild out there just in terms of the features that they're combined with it.
Yeah.
Not anything I was expecting, but definitely one that I found I came to appreciate, like you said, on paper more than I did as an actual shooter.
Mechanically, I love the Mark II. Just the number of things going on in that gun, as someone that likes the engineering on these things, and especially how they really finally tried to fit some final features in there.
Bruno do an animation on both of these?
I mean, they just saw them.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
To be fair, you just add some stuff to the other one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, I love these guns. I don't really want to carry one, but I really mechanically love these guns.
Well, break Tom's damn heart, why don't you?
All right, well, I guess that'll wrap us out.
Yeah.
You guys have a good one.
Bye, everybody.
No.
Hey, what's that on the counter over there? I'm trying
it's Ballistol. That's everywhere in this house now. That's all I do.
All the walls, just been replaced.
I put a framed picture of it on the ceiling when I wake up in the morning.
What to do with a squeaky roof fan?
Yeah, that's true. To be fair, I didn't know you can just use it on everything.
Yeah.
I have to figure out.
Salad. It's like a whole paragraph on the can.
Welcome to my challenge. Are you ready? Under the U.S. law, the FDA has to approve medicinal uses of things, but once you do that, then you have to go in the special place in the pharmacy. You can't just sell it at Lowe's, right?
Oh.
But Ballistol is based off of medicinal oil, so it's antibacterial. If you go, it's horrifying. Please be prepared to horrify yourself. If you go to like books.google.com, you can literally Google. I think it's in there as like wound care Ballistol or something like that. And it's like a diabetic 70-year-old that had his foot amputated, and they were treating it with Ballistol along with other things, and the recovery rate improved. But there's photos, so good God. But that's in Germany where they're allowed to do that. I think I met a Canadian once before this one.
They say they're Canadian, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah, how can you prove
are
it?
They? How do you prove it?
Well, the way he says a boot, that helps.
A boot,
oh my God, that of course that.
Nice.
Of course.
He swears he doesn't say it.
A boot.
He said, you
Some
say
people
it all the time.
everybody says
There's different.
You're
like,
saying it right now.
There's different levels of
Of course I'm saying it right now because I have to say what I don't say.
Right.
What?
Did you hear me correctly?
Some of them are
You
pretty
know the problem is, if everybody says I say y'all, I'm like, yeah, say y'all.
Yeah,
That's because you say y'all. I don't say a boot.
You don't, but other Canadians.
No, they don't.
He does,
I've
though.
definitely heard
No,
some.
Yeah, he
they
does
don't.
say it.
No, they don't. No.
I think a lot of them probably like get told it and then they like try and like.
It's because you guys try to pronounce the U too hard.
We don't say it.
Yes, you do.
There's two O's.
I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna
you find
I'm gonna take it and cut it out. And
That's not like a Mike Myers sketch, okay?
About.
You can't use that as your reference.
Yeah, that's not a. Yeah,
No,
that's
it's
not
zero.
an accurate portrayal. Yeah,
That is not a boot.
that's true.
You just said it the same way twice. in a
I
row.
did not. Your audience will attest. The comments are going to stream
clip it,
below
yeah.
saying, yes, it sounds
You know
different.
they're gonna
Either that or they're going to say, no, it sounds the same.
Crazy, beautifully simple. Now, I normally don't reassemble stuff while we're live, but because it is so ridiculously simple, let's just go ahead and, oh, look how nice. All that leverage, all that ease. Pop this guy around to lock her out, and boom. I love this revolver.